The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that blurs the city lights and makes the world outside your windshield feel like a dream. New York looked softer in the storm, streets shimmering like rivers of silver, headlights stretching like liquid fire across the slick asphalt. My wipers worked overtime, but they could barely keep up. I had been driving back from a late meeting in Midtown, my suit jacket draped over the passenger seat, and my mind elsewhere. On work, on bills, on the kind of thoughts that make the city feel lonely even when you're surrounded by millions of people. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the sidewalk across the road, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her coat soaked through, and yet she didn't move. Not toward the nearest awning, not to flag a cab, she just stood there, arms wrapped around herself like the rain didn't matter, like she was part of the storm itself. The streetlight above her flickered, catching the delicate line of her jaw, the way her wet hair clung to her neck. Something about her stopped me. Maybe it was the sadness in the way she held herself, or maybe it was the fact that in a city where everyone is always rushing somewhere, she was the only one standing still. I slowed down without even realizing it, my tires sending up little fountains of water as I eased to the curb. The horn of a cab blared behind me, but I ignored it. I rolled down the passenger window and the cold air rushed in, damp and sharp. "Hey!" I called over the roar of the rain. "You okay?" She blinked, startled, and then turned toward me. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, hers wide and green like spring leaves after a storm. I'm fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "You don't look fine." She laughed softly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Guess I'm not great at hiding things." Something in me shifted. I don't usually talk to strangers on the street, this is New York after all, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was the loneliness I'd been carrying all week. "Where are you headed?" I asked. She hesitated. "Downtown, but the subway's closed on my line, and cabs keep passing me by." "Hop in," I said before I could second-guess myself. "I'll give you a ride." She looked at me like she was measuring the risk. I could see her thinking, New York 101, don't get in cars with strangers. But the rain was relentless, and her shoulders slumped like she'd had enough. Finally, she opened the door and slid in, water dripping onto my leather seats. "Thanks," she murmured, brushing wet hair from her face. "No problem." I tried to sound casual, but my heart was racing. As I pulled back into traffic, the city around us seemed quieter somehow, muffled by the downpour. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stole a glance at her. Her lashes clumped together with rain. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. She wasn't wearing much makeup, but she didn't need it. She was beautiful in that effortless, accidental way that feels rare in this city. "What's your name?" I finally asked. "Emma," she said softly. "Nice to meet you, Emma. I'm Ryan." She gave a small, tired smile. "Thanks for stopping, Ryan. Not everyone would." "Not everyone should leave someone standing alone in this kind of storm," I said, and for the first time that night, she actually smiled. Not the polite, distant kind, but a real one. And just like that, the rain didn't feel so heavy anymore. The sound of the rain on the roof of my car was steady, almost hypnotic. For a while we just drove, the city outside blurring into streaks of neon and shadow. Every so often, the headlights of another car would flash across Emma's face, and I'd catch glimpses of her profile, the curve of her nose, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding back 1,000 unspoken words. "So," I said finally, breaking the silence. "Rough night?" She gave a short laugh, but there wasn't much humor in it. "That obvious, huh?" "Kind of," I admitted. "You looked like the rain had been picking on you personally." She smiled faintly at that. "It feels that way. I was supposed to meet someone tonight, but they never showed. I waited too long, missed the last reliable train, and here I am, drenched and stranded." "Wow, that's brutal." Emma shrugged, but her eyes flickered with something, hurt maybe, or disappointment. "It's New York. People disappear all the time." I felt a pang in my chest. I knew that feeling, expecting someone to care and finding out they didn't. The city could make you feel invincible and invisible all at once. "Whoever stood you up is an idiot," I said, keeping my voice light. She glanced at me, surprised, then smirked. "Maybe. Or maybe I just expect too much." "Expecting people to show up isn't too much," I said quietly. It's the bare minimum." She didn't answer, but her gaze softened. The traffic light ahead turned red, and I stopped at the intersection. The rain was still coming down in thick, shimmering sheets, bouncing off the hood of my car. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Emma hugging her arms around herself again, like the chill had finally seeped into her bones. "Here," I said, shrugging out of my suit jacket. "It's dry, warmer than what you've got." She hesitated, then took it, slipping it over her shoulders. It looked too big on her, the sleeves covering her hands, but somehow it fit perfectly in a way I couldn't explain. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're welcome." When the light turned green, we moved again. "So what about you?" she asked after a moment. "Why are you out driving around in a storm like this?" I chuckled. "Long day at work. I'm in marketing, and tonight was one of those nights where every email feels like a personal attack." She laughed quietly, and the sound was lighter this time. "That bad, huh?" "You have no idea," I said, shaking my head. "But seeing you out there made me forget about all of it for a second." She glanced at me, and I saw a flicker of surprise and something else in her eyes. "You didn't have to stop," she said after a moment. "Most people wouldn't." "I know," I replied, my hands tightening slightly on the wheel. "But I couldn't just drive past. You looked like you needed someone to care, even for a minute." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak right away. Then she said so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I did." We fell into silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. The air in the car felt different, warmer, like the storm outside had brought us into the same fragile, fleeting world. When we reached her neighborhood downtown, I slowed the car and asked, "Which building is yours?" She pointed toward a row of old brick apartments, their windows glowing softly against the storm. As I pulled up to the curb, she didn't reach for the door right away. Instead, she turned to me. "You saved me tonight, Ryan, even if it was just from the rain." And for some reason, that simple sentence stayed with me long after she disappeared into the storm. The rain had eased by morning, but the city still smelled like wet pavement and coffee. I woke earlier than usual, restless, the memory of Emma in my car lingering like a song you can't get out of your head. I couldn't shake the image of her standing in the rain, her green eyes flashing when she smiled for the first time. All day at work, I found myself drifting. The office buzzed with its usual chaos, phones ringing, co-workers arguing over marketing pitches, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. But my mind was miles away, replaying the way her voice had softened when she said, "You saved me tonight." By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I left early, telling my boss I had a client dinner, which was only half a lie. I had dinner plans now, just not the kind he'd expect. I wasn't sure what I was doing as I drove downtown again. New York is a massive city, and for all I knew, I'd never see Emma again. But something inside me refused to accept that. I parked near the same row of brick apartments and sat there for a moment, staring at the rain-streaked windows. The storm had passed, but puddles still lined the curbs, reflecting the city's neon glow. I thought about just walking away, but then I saw her. She was coming out of a corner café, a paper cup in her hand, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Even in jeans and an oversized sweater, she looked effortlessly beautiful, like she belonged in one of those candid street photographs people frame and hang on their walls. Before I could lose my nerve, I stepped out of the car. "Emma," I called. She turned, startled, and then her expression shifted to surprise, and something that might have been happiness. "Ryan?" she said, her voice rising just a little over the city's noise. I grinned, walking toward her. "I figured I owed you an apology. I let you walk out last night without making sure you got inside safely." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing at her lips. "Are you always this persistent with strangers?" "Only the ones who get stuck in storms," I said. She laughed, and the sound felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Well, you found me." For a moment, we just stood there, the city rushing around us, taxis honking, people weaving through puddles, the faint hum of music from a nearby street performer. It felt strange, standing still with her in the middle of all that movement, like the world was trying to remind us how rare these moments are. "Can I buy you a coffee?" I asked. "Or maybe dinner? To make up for last night?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her paper cup. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Something in my chest sank. Because I'm a stranger? Because... She trailed off, looking away. Because the person who was supposed to meet me last night was my boyfriend. Well, ex-boyfriend, I guess. He didn't show. And now, I don't really know what I'm doing. I nodded slowly, trying to hide the disappointment that flashed through me. I get it. You're not ready. She met my gaze again, her eyes softer now. But maybe coffee wouldn't hurt. Relief bloomed in my chest. Coffee it is. We walked back toward the café together, the sound of the city wrapping around us like a heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. We found a small table by the window, and as she sipped her drink, I couldn't help but notice the way her shoulders seemed a little less heavy than the night before. For the first time in a long while, New York didn't feel so lonely. The café was buzzing with life. Students hunched over laptops, friends catching up over pastries, a jazz song humming softly through the speakers. Outside the window, the city kept moving, but in here, it felt like time had slowed, like New York had decided to give us a little privacy. Emma sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, as if it was an anchor. Her green eyes wandered out the window now and then, but when they landed back on me, it felt like she was studying something carefully, like she wasn't sure what she'd find. So, I said, stirring my own drink just to keep my hands busy, tell me something about yourself. Something small. Something that doesn't involve being stood up in the rain. That earned a quiet laugh. Small? Okay, I'm a graphic designer, freelance, which is just a fancy way of saying I work in pajamas most days and stress about deadlines the rest. Sounds glamorous, I teased. Oh, totally, she said, rolling her eyes. Clients changing their minds 5 times an hour, invoices that take forever to get paid. It's the dream. I grinned. And yet, you make the city look better for the rest of us. She blinked at that, then smiled, a real one. Your turn. I pretended to think hard. I'm in marketing, but my real passion is terrible karaoke. I once cleared out an entire bar trying to sing Bon Jovi. Emma laughed. Really laughed this time, and I felt something in me shift again, like a piece I didn't know was missing had just clicked into place. Okay, that's impressive, she said. I mean, not the singing, but the courage. Courage or lack of shame, jury's still out. Her laughter faded into a soft smile, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. There was something vulnerable in her expression, a quiet kind of sadness that hadn't completely left her since last night. Can I ask what happened? I said gently. With your ex? She hesitated, tracing a finger along the rim of her cup. We'd been together 3 years. Lately, it felt like I was the only one trying. Last night was supposed to be our chance to fix things, but he didn't show, and that was my answer, I guess. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. She shrugged, but her eyes glistened. It's weird. You think you know someone. You build all these plans in your head, and then, in one night, it's gone. I wanted to reach across the table to take her hand, to tell her she deserved better, but I wasn't sure if that was my place yet. So instead, I said quietly, maybe it's not gone. Maybe it's just making room for something better. She looked at me for a long time, like she was trying to decide whether to believe that. The barista called out an order, the sound jolting us back to the present. Emma blinked, then laughed softly. You're a stranger who pulled over in the rain, and now you're giving me life advice. You must do this a lot. Only when the universe drops someone interesting in front of me, I said. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she took a sip of her coffee to hide her smile. When we finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped completely. The city streets were shining, the sky a deep indigo. We walked outside together, side by side, and for the first time since last night, she didn't look like someone standing still while the world rushed past. As we reached the corner where we'd part ways, she turned to me. Ryan, thanks. For coffee. For last night. For... She trailed off. For being a persistent stranger? I offered. She laughed. For that, too. She started to walk away, but glanced back once, her eyes catching mine under the city lights. And in that fleeting glance, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see her. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Emma. New York is a city of fleeting connections, faces you pass on the subway, Conversations you forget by the time the doors close. But Emma wasn't fleeting. She lingered, like the scent of rain on pavement after a storm. On Friday evening, after a long day of meetings that felt more like battles, I found myself walking near her neighborhood. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. I texted her, just as simple, "Hey, I'm in the area, want to grab dinner?" For a minute, I wasn't sure she'd answer. Then my phone buzzed. "You caught me between deadlines. Dinner sounds perfect." We met at a little Italian place tucked between two brownstones, the kind with flickering candles on every table and soft music playing in the background. Emma arrived wearing a deep green dress that made her eyes even brighter, her damp hair curling slightly from the misty air outside. "You clean up well," I said, pulling out her chair. She smirked. "And here I thought freelance designers didn't have to impress anyone." "Consider me impressed anyway." The waiter brought bread and wine, and soon we were talking like old friends. She told me about her childhood in a small upstate town, about sketching landscapes on the back of napkins. I told her about my disastrous first job in marketing, where I once sent a mass email with the subject line, "Your name here." We laughed until people at the next table started smiling at us. Somewhere between pasta and dessert, her expression softened. "You know," she said quietly, "I wasn't sure about saying yes tonight." "Why's that?" "Because this feels fast. And after what happened last week, I promised myself I'd slow down. But sitting here with you," she trailed off, biting her lip, "it doesn't feel fast. It feels right." My chest tightened in the best way. "Then maybe it's not about speed," I said. "Maybe it's about timing." Her gaze held mine for a long moment, and I felt the world around us blur. The clinking glasses, the hum of conversation, even the city outside. It was like the universe had paused to give us space. When dinner ended, we stepped out into the cool night air. The rain had left the streets gleaming, and the city lights sparkled like scattered stars. We walked slowly, not in any rush to reach wherever we were headed. At the corner near her building, she stopped. "Ryan," she began, her voice soft. "Yeah?" She hesitated, then smiled. A small, genuine smile that made my heart ache. "I'm glad you stopped that night." "Me too," I said. "More than you know." We stood there for a moment, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. The city roared around us, taxis honking, a street performer strumming a guitar. But somehow it felt like we were standing in a bubble where none of it could reach us. Then, impulsively, she stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence against the cool night. "I should go," she whispered, though she didn't move. "Yeah," I replied, but neither did I. Finally, she turned and walked toward her building. She glanced back once, and that single glance held 1,000 possibilities. As I watched her disappear inside, I realized something. In a city of millions, where connections vanish like raindrops on glass, I had found someone worth holding on to. The following week passed in a blur of deadlines and subway rides, but Emma was always there, in a message that popped up mid-meeting, in the song playing on the radio during my morning commute, in the memory of her laughter echoing through that candlelit restaurant. On Wednesday, she texted, "Got a last-minute design pitch out of town, back Friday. Miss me a little?" I grinned at my phone. "More than a little. Safe travels." Friday came, and the city felt unusually quiet without her. I wandered the streets near her apartment, half hoping I'd run into her. The rain had returned, softer this time, a gentle drizzle that kissed the sidewalks. By the time I reached the café where we'd first had coffee, I couldn't help but go inside. I sat by the window, sipping a latte, remembering her sitting in the same spot, the way she'd traced the rim of her cup as she spoke about heartbreak and hope. Outside, New York rushed by. But for me, the world was holding its breath. When my phone buzzed, I snatched it up, expecting a "landed safely." Instead, it was a voice call. Emma's voice came through, warm, but edged with worry. "Ryan, can you meet me tonight? I need to talk." The words sent a ripple of unease through me, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course." "Same cafe?" "No." "Can you pick me up?" "Same corner as the first night." By the time I pulled up to the curb, the drizzle had turned into a steady rain again. She stood there just like the first night, her hair damp, her expression unreadable. When she climbed into the car, she didn't speak right away. Everything okay? I asked gently. She let out a breath. The pitch went well, but while I was gone, my ex called. He wants to talk. He says he made a mistake. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. And what do you want? She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine like she was hoping I'd give her an answer she couldn't find on her own. I don't know, part of me thinks I should hear him out. 3 years is a long time. The city lights blurred on the windshield as I drove aimlessly, neither of us suggesting a destination. I'm not going to tell you what to do, I said finally. But I need to be honest. Seeing you again, spending time with you, it's not casual for me. Her breath caught, just slightly. Ryan. I get it, I continued, my voice low. You're hurt, and maybe you need closure. But I can't pretend this is just some passing thing. Not after the way you make this city feel different. She turned to the window, her reflection merging with the streaks of rain outside. For a while, we drove in silence, the only sounds the steady hum of the tires and the distant wail of a siren. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You're not supposed to meet someone like this, are you? On a random stormy night. And yet... She trailed off, shaking her head. And yet, here we are, I said. We ended up at a small park, the kind with iron benches and trees that glistened under the rain. I parked and we sat there for a while, the city a distant hum around us. Ryan, she said quietly, I don't know where this is going, but when I was standing out there in the rain that night, I felt invisible, and then you stopped. I reached across the console, hesitated for just a moment, then took her hand. She didn't pull away. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside the car, it felt like the world had finally paused again, just long enough for hope to breathe. Saturday arrived with a rare kind of autumn sunshine, warm, golden, and full of promises. But by evening, the clouds rolled in again, heavy and dark, like the city was preparing to remind us where we'd begun. Emma texted me just before sunset. Can we meet? The park where you stopped last night. When I arrived, the first drops of rain had already started to fall, soft and tentative. She was standing by the same iron bench where we'd sat, her green dress swaying in the breeze, her hair loose and wild. For a second, I just watched her, the way the streetlight haloed her in silver, the way she seemed both fragile and unshakable at once. She turned when she heard my footsteps. Hey, I replied, my voice a little rougher than I'd meant. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city around us felt muted, like even New York was waiting to hear what she'd say. I saw him, she said finally. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. I swallowed. Your ex. She nodded. We talked. He apologized. He said all the right things. And for a moment I almost believed him. She looked down, then back at me. But standing there, listening to him, I realized I wasn't waiting for him anymore. The rain picked up, falling harder now, streaking her cheeks like tears that weren't really there. Emma, I began, but she held up a hand, a small, shaking gesture. I thought I'd be broken after him, she said. But then that night, you, stopping for me, the coffee, the dinner, you reminded me what it feels like to be seen. Really seen. My chest tightened, the weight of her words settling in. She took a shaky breath. So I told him no. I told him I'm not going back. The relief that surged through me was sharp and overwhelming, but I didn't move closer yet. I let her speak. And now, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain, I don't know where this goes. I don't know what will be. But when I think about that night in the storm, about you pulling over when you didn't have to, I know I want to find out. This time I didn't hesitate. I stepped toward her, closing the distance between us. The rain soaked through my shirt, dripped from my hair, but none of it mattered. I reached for her hand first, just like I had in the car the night before, giving her a chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer until her forehead rested against my chest. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, two strangers who weren't strangers anymore, listening to the city's distant heartbeat and the steady rhythm of the rain. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes sparkled even through the storm. "I'm here," I said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, a small, trembling smile that felt like sunrise after a long night. And then, under the glow of the streetlight and the downpour of a New York rain, she leaned in. The world didn't stop spinning. The city didn't go silent. But for us, everything slowed. The kiss wasn't perfect, too much rain, too much trembling. But it was real. It tasted of rainwater and second chances, of something fragile and fierce all at once. When we finally pulled apart, she laughed softly, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "Looks like the rain's our thing now." "Then let it rain," I said, grinning through the storm. We walked through the park hand in hand, the city stretching endlessly ahead of us. And for the first time in years, New York didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like possibility. And somewhere between the raindrops and the city lights, I knew. That night in the storm hadn't just changed her life. It had changed mine, too.